National Signing Day is less than a week away. Tennessee got a big-time commit earlier this week. We'll go into more detail on Arion Carter and what to expect for Tennessee and National Signing Day 2023. John Garcia, Sports Illustrated, joins me here on a Friday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, everybody? Welcome into it. This is your Friday edition of Locked On Vols. Locked On Vols, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That is your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props and odds and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Appreciate you guys for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. 6K by Christmas Day on YouTube. Let's get 6,000 subscribers by Christmas Day. Appreciate you guys for liking the video, watching, following along, and of course listening wherever you find your podcast. All right, today we're going to discuss a whole lot of recruiting. Tennessee in the class of 2023. Tennessee picking up a commit earlier this week. Tennessee really finishing off, concluding this 2023 cycle. To do that, going to welcome on our buddy John Garcia of Sports Illustrated, who is always kind enough to join us. John, what's going on, man?
Doing well, Eric. Yeah, like you said, it's crunch time. Everybody's head is on a swivel, but I guess not your audience. You guys are in that luxury of saying, "Hey, job's done. Let's make it official on Wednesday and enjoy the spoils of a great combination of course, on-field ascent and really long-standing recruiting prowess." Because this class, the foundation was in before this great run that Tennessee went on. So when those things all align, it's kind of a beautiful thing, and the Vols will bring in a nice, balanced top 10 class on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, it's Tennessee had 21 commits before the Vols took their first snap of this season. So, I mean, the heavy lifting was there. And Josh Heupel and company's done a good job. They went and got an upgrade at the running back position. They went and solidified and won David Hobbs. And you go out and get another offensive lineman for this class. Then, of course, earlier this week, Arion Carter, you make sure you solidify an in-state prospect who doesn't get out. You win over Alabama, and I just think this guy, I mean, he didn't play linebacker before this year, and he plays the position so well. You can tell that he's a running back on that side, on the other side of the ball. You can tell that he's got a defensive back, background as well. The way he buzzes his feet out of the box. I really like Arion Carter. What do you like about this pickup for Tennessee?
This is great. Really in all facets, as you mentioned, whether you look at it purely from a football standpoint, look, an up-and-coming emerger with that modern athletic profile and skill set, yes, that box is checked. If you look at it from an in-state scenario, right, geography, keeping another elite Tennessean in the state is a big deal. Flipping him from Memphis, basically, a big deal in and of itself. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the third part, who you beat to get the kid, beating Alabama head-to-head and others, by the way. Everybody tried to get in this recruitment even before he decommitted from Memphis. But it really came down to Tennessee and Alabama. And not only did you beat Alabama, you beat the buzz of Alabama. There was a long portion of this thing, Eric, where it felt like the Crimson Tide had a little bit more buzz than UT, and they got the last visit. So, again, optically, this was a bit of an underdog scenario for Tennessee, and they pull it out there in the end. This is kind of the fitting endpoint to the recruiting cycle, because there are several players, whether you look at Hobbs, look at some of these other guys, that it was similar for, right? Nico Iamaleava started it, it felt like, where you're just starting to beat big-time programs week in, week out, and now you're doing it closer to home to wrap up the cycle over your arch rival. So very fitting end to the class, and obviously, even if Arion Carter was from, Delaware or Oregon or Montana, huge pickup to wrap up a really nice front seven haul. And this is one of those guys that could play anywhere in that second level. He could play on the edge. He could play off ball. He could bulk up and be kind of an old school inside backer, and he certainly can drop back and cover. So you're getting a multifaceted linebacker to wrap up this class of 2023, about as ideal as it could have gotten for Tennessee, in my opinion.
I shared this on the show yesterday. Myself covering recruiting as well. When all the buzz started with Arion Carter, I gave him a phone call, talked to him about when Tennessee offered him, And I mean, he was pumped. He was thrilled. He had like 15 Power 5 offers that week.
Yeah.
But I remember asking about the Alabama offer, and he just shined. He just glowed. He just, I mean, you could see it. I know I couldn't see him, but you could just feel it. He said, "Man, that's one I've always wanted. It's one I dreamed about. You know, the Alabama, Nick Saban, yada yada yada. Grew up an Alabama fan, and it's just wild to me because again, I mean, credit Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel went in here and stole, in my opinion, kind of went in here and stole this one, really. And again, it's an in-state kid, and I know it's kind of weird to say, but that's just the fact of the matter. So good pickup for Tennessee. John, I want to ask you about another commitment from Tennessee or to Tennessee from a couple weeks ago. Larry Johnson III. He is a big offensive tackle body. I think he might be a guard at the SEC level, but 6'7", 365 pounds from Hutchinson in the JUCO ranks. What do you like about Larry Johnson?
I like how he carries his weight. You know, I saw his video before I saw his listed size. So usually when one surprises you, it's not the worst thing in the world, and that was certainly true in this case because I watched him on tape and he moved very well. He played both left and right tackle, which is great. If you're talking about a potential swing lineman in the SEC, already having that sort of left versus right mentality, even if he moves inside, is a big deal because, as you know, Eric, even lining up on one side of the line versus the other is a very big deal for offensive linemen. So a guy who already has that comfort and experience, at least in principle, that gives you a nice leg up. And then I saw that he's listed at 6'7", 350, and I'm like, hold on, is he really this big? And you look at photos and other things, and you're like, oh my gosh, he absolutely is that big. And then I started to like him a lot more because now, as you mentioned, you're able to kick him inside if you have to. He can play right tackle in a pinch. He could serve as one of those glue offensive linemen to where somebody goes down and you got to reshuffle the deck. Now he allows you some versatility to do so, even in the middle of an SEC game. But individually, Larry's got some goods. You know, he redirects and kicks very well, especially for his size. Obviously, when he's run blocking, when he's able to get all that weight on you, it's very hard for these defensive linemen to get off of him. But I was really impressed in the pass blocking, right? Because when you're that big, that's where you're going to have a perceived weakness. And there were a lot of smaller players at the junior college level combating him, trying to win with speed, trying to win with quickness, and his length and movement skills helped to slow that down to a very large degree. So I like this pickup. You've got a very balanced offensive line class with a different level of timeline expectation to when prospect X is going to be ready to go. So bringing in a junior college guy who is also versatile to wrap it up makes a lot of sense because you're going to have some turnover with that group like you do every year.
We're going to break down in detail Tennessee's offensive class, Tennessee's defensive class. That's coming up later in the show. But last thing here in segment one, I do want to go to the class of 2024. MJ Bennett's one of the best players in that cycle, one of the best wide receivers. He was committed to Tennessee, made that commitment back in October, went ahead and decommitted, probably because Alex Golish left the program.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird. The timing was it just didn't really make sense because the night he decommitted is when Jalen Hyatt won the Blitnikoff. What do you think about MJ Bennett? I think Tennessee's still going to be in this running, but I think this is a situation to where he pulled the trigger a little bit too soon as a junior right now, or as a rising senior, and I think he just had a little second thoughts.
Yeah, look, still over a year to go in this recruitment. So it could go back and forth. This kid has had a ton of SEC, ACC interest coming out of South Carolina. So you could understand where, one, there is some inkling to, hey, let's make an early decision, right? We've got kind of all the offers we want. Let's pick a school. But then you also understand thereafter coaching changes, personnel changes at really both schools, right? At in-state South Carolina, offensive coordinator change. At Tennessee, offense coordinator change. And other schools that are in on him are naturally going to have those changes either this year or the next anyway. So, yeah, it's for any early commitment. It really is, I guess, more dangerous or fluid than it's ever been because of the nature of the carousel. But, yeah, I think obviously South Carolina is the program that benefits most initially from this Tennessee decommitment. It's the home state school, even though, as you mentioned, the Biletnikoff Award winner also from the state of South Carolina. I think that's probably the first time I've ever seen a decommitment the night a player at that position at the school he's committed to wins a national award like that. But that's recruiting. It's so fluid. Tennessee won't slow down for him. I think that's important to note here. This wasn't one of those, mutual parting of ways where everyone's going to just say, oh, hey, thanks for nothing and move on. It's not really a moving on scenario. It's more of a reset on MJ's part, and you go from there. But it's not like, to me, he's on the verge of committing to South Carolina, because they're still trying to figure that out from the coaching staff perspective as well.
And of course, from in his defense, I mean, you don't know when those awards are coming out. You're not thinking about that.
Of course.
Just like the other day, Jalen Hyatt announces he's going to the NFL. Right at the same time Arion Carter's committing. Everybody's like, why are they doing that at the same time? They're two separate situations. They're not
Correct.
They're not connected. They're not thinking about that. Makes it tough for people like me, but hey, just gotta is what it is. Hey, we'll have more with John Garcia coming up here in segments 2 and 3 of the show as we talk Tennessee recruiting, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Speaking of another proud sponsor of this show, let's throw a little BetOnline scenarios at you right now. Of course, I love Championship Saturday a couple weekends ago. Whenever you dive into the lines for the SEC Championship, ACC Championship, Big Ten, the Pac-12 there on a Friday night. I made a lot of coin there for the Christmas holiday season a couple weeks ago on Championship Saturday. But you don't have to wait till football Saturdays or NFL Sundays or NFL Thursday nights or whatever the case may be. I mean, there's NBA happening right now. There's college basketball out there right now. Every amateur league you can possibly think of, they've got all that action over at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts as well, just like the one you're listening to right now, they have those options at BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to get all your sports information. You can head on over to the website today or check it out on your mobile device to learn about all the latest trends and all the action. That is BetOnline. It is where the game starts. We'll go back into your Friday edition of Locked On Vols. I'm your host, Eric Kane. So happy to have you guys with me here today. Just a reminder, no Monday show. Your boy's got a big weekend coming up, so no Monday show. We will be back on Tuesday for the rest of next week and get you ready for National Signing Day. Also, to get you ready for National Signing Day, we got our recruiting guy, John Garcia from Sports Illustrated and the Locked On Podcast Network. He's set to join us here right now, talking Tennessee's class of 2023. John, when you look at Tennessee's class, 25 commitments now with Arion Carter in the boats. You got 2 from the transfer portal coming in. Of course, that's a whole separate deal. But I think everybody back in March when Nico Iamaleava committed, everybody just kind of sat there and said, oh my gosh, this offensive class is going to be huge. It's going to be amazing. Not so much the case. I really like Tennessee's defensive makeup in this class, the way it's built, the caliber of players that are in here. What do you like about this defensive committed class for Tennessee?
I'm right there with you, Eric. When Nico committed, and then you combine it with the on-field product offensively, right? You're just like, oh my gosh, Tennessee's going to have this amazing offensive class. And by the way, they do. This is a great group offensively. Mm-hmm. But still, both before that and during and here, with the close ahead of signing day, it's really the defensive prospects that are commanding our attention, right? With Hobbs. I mean, Davian Bradley is an elite pass rusher, as is Caleb Herring. We love Arion Carter, who we just talked about. The secondary group has its key figures where you have true cover corners, like your Jordan Matthew types that are going to be borderline instant impact players. And then you've got guys who, with time and development, your John Slaughters of the world come to mind, where they're going to be nickel safety types that eventually have a really big impact. So I like the very top end of this defensive class, Eric, but I really like the depth of the group. And I know we've talked about this on previous episodes as well. Tennessee was able in this class, even on defense, to go into other states and win against SEC rivals. We just mentioned Slaughter. He's from Mississippi. We just mentioned Matthews. He's a New Orleans kid, right? So you're winning in state with your Herrings of the world, with your Arion Carters of the world, but then you're going up to St. Louis for Bradley, and you're going outside of the region to pick up the difference makers on the defensive side of the ball. So I like that element of this class as well, because it shows some ambition and it shows some kind of, I guess, foreshadowing of what we actually saw on the field this year, where Tennessee is recruiting like it views itself as a top 5, top 10 type program overall. That has not always been the case with Tennessee. There was a time earlier in my career where Tennessee recruited very regionally, very much like, hey, we're competing with North Carolina, and we're competing with NC State, and we're competing with those kind of schools, Kentucky, for recruits in this sort of Tennessee to the Carolinas and Atlanta corridor. Not the case anymore. So that door has been blown wide open, and it just, again, paired so well with the season that we saw Tennessee have. So again, to have the luxury of rolling into signing day, kind of knowing, hey, things are good, we're sort of set. I mean, that is another true mark of stability. But again, the base of that is really this defensive class, which is somehow better than the offensive group. And that's something that I tweeted out the other day. And of course, the Tennessee fans on Twitter are among the most hungry in the country, if not the most hungry. They found it. They loved it. And it's true. It's just fascinating optically and from 30,000 feet up to see this defensive group look better than the offensive group when the offensive group is really darn good in its own right. So a great group assembled, ambitious, and some key victories outside of the footprint as well as inside, capping with fittingly, as we said earlier, Arion Carter.
Josh Heupel has had a plan on the recruiting trail each of his first couple of cycles here at Tennessee. The first one, I guess that would have been the class of 2022. Gosh, it's still finished well for him, but that was his first true class, and that's tough, man. I mean, he got in here like almost in February, and you're so far behind the 8-ball, but he still finished strong. He went and he got edge players and to come in and make a difference, like Joshua Josephs and obviously James Pierce. And then in this cycle, you've got Caleb Herring, Shadavion Bradley, knowing the importance of the quarterback position and the importance of getting after the quarterback position. So I love the way that he's built these classes. Let's go back, though, to the second layer. Let's continue to talk a little linebacker with Arion Carter. I'm borderline obsessed with this linebacker group because I think these guys are going to be good players. They're underrated as well. We talk Arion Carter. Jeremiah Thielander is a tackle machine. He was named MVP of the state championship game in Georgia high school football. That's quite an accomplishment. Jalen Smith plays at one of the best high school programs in America. He's just a production machine. I think this linebacker group is super underrated. They're underranked. They're underrated. I think that they might not be step on the field day one players, but they might be pretty close to that. I mean, I think they're going to play a long time.
And they all can cover, Eric. That's the thing. It's like you want to build great classes and win all these great 5-star battles. Yes, of course, right? But really, how well do you put a group together, right? That's really what it's about. It's roster construction. It's not individual construction. And this linebacker group has that combination of, well, they're a little bit different, but where they do overlap is in the most important areas: athleticism, production, and that coverage ability. I think that's so fascinating. I've seen Thielander, who's maybe not known as much for that coverage ability, lock down great running backs in space, even in camp settings where, let's be honest, you're behind the 8-ball as a linebacker. None of those camps are built for you in any way, shape, or form, yet Thielander finds a way to flash every time we see him. And then obviously on the field on Friday nights, even more productive and important to his team. You mentioned Smith, obviously incredibly productive, well coached, technically sound, yet still has this frame to where he's going to put on some good weight and maybe move around. Maybe he's the inside linebacker of this group. And obviously we've talked about Carter at length. He can do anything you need at the second level. He's going to be able to help you in that department. So yeah, this group has a bit of everything. We love the D-line group. That's going to be the one that gets all of the talk and conversation, and rightfully so. But the back seven is pretty darn strong at Tennessee in this class as well. And you've got, again, that blend of picking up elite talent, but also balancing it out with strong positional groups that offer you enough variance to move people around, but enough of a high floor athletically to where these guys, like you said, are going to make an impact sooner rather than later.
Last thing here on the defensive side of the football for Tennessee, you mentioned that back seven. Let's talk about that back five. I say that back five because it's routine now. I mean, you're a 4-2-5 defense. That's you see that's more common with the nickelback, the star position, pretty much everywhere you go. I mean, that's common in high school now too. I mean, I do high school football on Thursday nights here in East Tennessee, and you see that in high school as well. I like the makeup of Tennessee's defensive backs. Safe to say that the corners in this class are more impressive. I don't want to say higher ceiling, but they might be more impactful players early on in their career than maybe the safeties. Because the corners, you got Jordan Matthews, Ricky Gibson, Christian Conyer. The safeties, Sylvester Smith, I think, is a really good player. You've got, of course, Jack Luttrell and John Slaughter that you already mentioned. What do you like about these 6 defensive backs coming in to help Tennessee? Where if I'm those guys, I'm sitting there saying, okay, there's opportunity here for me at Tennessee. I see what they're doing on the field right now back there.
Yeah, well, I mentioned Matthews earlier. Love this kid's game. I think he is. Look, for us, he's an SI 99 guy. This is a corner that has the requisite height and length and athleticism box checked in Sharpie already before you ever get to college, and that's just not something that we often see in this day and age. And on top of it, he's a Baton Rouge kid, right? So he plays great competition. He's worked on the offensive side of the ball as well, which is a great sign and signal of overall athleticism and ball skills. So he checks those boxes in a big way. I'm with you. Sylvester Smith is underrated. If he doesn't get hurt in between his junior and senior year, this is a very, very tight race. This is an Arion Carter style recruitment if he doesn't get banged up at Munford High School. Because remember, before that, I think like Georgia was his first offer. This kid as a sophomore really burst onto the SEC recruiting scene 2 years ago, and it just kind of cooled down. I think he's got exceptional instincts and some true nickel abilities that could potentially help the corner group and the safety group somewhat simultaneously. And then Ricky Gibson's the wild card. You've got polished corners, you've got versatile corners, and then you've got X. I think Ricky is the X. He is the guy where if everything clicks, when we look back at this class, he will be one of the first couple of names we bring up overall because he's long, he's incredibly fast, and the ball skills are there. If the technique and the physicality come along in the next year or two, this could be an all SEC type corner. And we'll look back at this one and say, man, how in the world did Tennessee go down to Birmingham, of all places, and win this recruitment over Alabama, over Auburn, and over everyone else closer to home? So I do think this is an interesting group in the secondary. You've got that nice combination of we know what these guys are, but we also don't quite know what this group is. And that usually blends well together in the next couple seasons, especially at the SEC level from a competitive standpoint.
And for Ricky Gibson, you had to, continue to stiff arm Georgia away there, for a little bit because Georgia came calling after the commitment and had to do their part there. Great stuff there from John Garcia, and John, we'll discuss a little Tennessee offensive commits here in segment number 3. Guys, I want to remind you about a message that's coming in from the NHTSA here on this holiday season. It can happen so easily. Okay, you're out with your friends, your coworkers, you're putting back a few drinks. Few becomes too many. We've all been there, right? It's time to go, and for a moment you think for calling for a ride, but you think better of it. At least that's what you think. He said you're a good driver. You live nearby. You can make this okay. What are the odds you're going to get pulled over, right? And even so, what's the worst that can happen? You lose your license. You lose your job. You total your car. Let me tell you, it can get much, much worse than that. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's life forever. Play it safe and plan ahead. Please get a ride. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, guys, we continue on with this Friday edition of Locked On Vols, talking recruiting. You guys know I love to talk a little Tennessee recruiting, and we're going to continue on talking a little Tennessee recruiting because National Signing Day is on Wednesday. The bulk of Tennessee's class, pretty much all of Tennessee's commits will sign on Wednesday, and I would imagine that it'll be over with early in the morning. I remember I was on the air last year, and by 9:30, Tennessee's class was done for the most part, right? So it's just wild. I mean, it's a different era. 16 early enrollees for Tennessee, 14 are on campus right now beginning bowl practice. So it's a difference. It's way different. There's going to be no suspense in my opinion. There's going to be no Tyree West. There's going to be no James Pierce this year. Obviously, it's not like the old February National Signing Day to where it's like a holiday. It's done. It's in the book. Signed, sealed, delivered. It is what it is. But still, credit Tennessee for being in this position. All right, let's bring back on our good buddy John Garcia, our Locked On insider in terms of recruiting. John, we talked defense in that first segment, but still, as you pointed out a couple of times, a lot to like about these offensive commits, and it all starts with the quarterback Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah, it's like, have we forgotten about this one? It's amazing to consider that. Really, I would say the the splash early quarterback commitment nationally was this.
Yeah, it was.
It was Tennessee locking in Nico, and I loved it at the time because it was two things. We talked about this on defense, the ambition, right? The ambition to go to California and win a recruitment that, let's be honest, we don't see Tennessee win, right? That's not typical recently of what to expect from the Vols. But before that point, the self-awareness, I'm sure I've mentioned it on this show, the self-awareness to early in the class of 2023 trajectory say, hey, I know Arch Manning's a legacy, but it's probably not going to happen. To understand that and move forward, which a lot of big-time programs did not do by choice. They decided to dig their heels in and swing away anyway. That allowed you to go all in on Nico. And at that point, there weren't a lot of programs doing that. So Tennessee was able to make up considerable ground on Iamaleava on the front end of really his emergence, right? Because he was still picking up scholarship offers and the dust was still settling at the end of last cycle. So other programs were jumping in and out of that thing really until the 11th hour. So Tennessee doing that on the front end really enabled them to gain a lot of ground with Nico, and the rest was history. He committed early, March, no drama, and now you help build the class with such a notable ambassador for Tennessee football and the future of Tennessee football. And it worked out perfectly, obviously, with what we saw during the season. But let's also not forget that Nico's a really darn good quarterback. You know, I think the story of Nico sometimes helps us forget about why he is such a story. That's kind of an issue in all of sports media these days, right? It's like LeBron did this, but like LeBron's amazing, right? Like let's focus on those elements. And Iamaleava has so much to like. Big, athletic, the biggest and best arm in this class of 23. There is a confidence in him. There's a mobility in him that will remind a lot of people of Hendon Hooker in terms of how he looks and feels with the ball in his hands. But when you talk about his ability to potentially add weight and polish up some of those things, there could be a higher ceiling for Iamaleava when all is said and done, and sooner, right? Hooker, one of the older players in college football this year. We expect a lot of that a lot sooner with Nico. And by the way, he had an unbelievable senior season. There was a lot of conversation about, was he going to change schools? Then he did, then he didn't. Was he going to go to IMG? What was all that like? A lot of stuff going around there. But once he settled back at Warren in Downey, California, Nico really never looked back. And he has that one thing that beyond numbers and the tangible you have to look at with quarterbacks. He makes people around him better. We see it on the 7-on-7 circuit. We saw it again on Friday nights throughout the fall. He makes a group of guys that frankly don't belong in a recruiting conversation. He makes them all elevate. So Nico's got everything you want at the quarterback position, and he deserves his own segment, if you will, on this show, because he'll sign and it won't be a big deal, but it should be. This is one of the best 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country at worst, by the way.
Yeah, we could look back and I mean, this 2023 quarterback class is really, really strong. And I'm intrigued to look back in 3, 4, 5 years and kind of see where all these guys are. And Nico could very easily be the best one of the bunch. You know, we'll have to say. In terms of guys around him at the skill position, Nathan Laycock, wide receiver, just absolutely dominated his senior football season, shot up everybody's board. You know, we talk about these consensus rankings and all that type of stuff. It's sitting, you know, equally generated amongst all the services out there. I mean, he's sitting just outside the 100 mark at 103, so it looks really good. Ethan Davis, who got injured his senior season, like him a whole lot at tight end. Cam Seldon, running back, wide receiver. I mean, just a touchdown machine in high school at a number, and as a returner as well, he can do an awful lot. So, I mean, you look at some of these guys. I like the skill makeup of this class, but then when you get down to the nitty gritty of the offensive line, I like some of the personnel moves down there. But I will say, if there's a weakness of this class, and I want to know if you agree with me, Tennessee tried, but they swung and missed on several offensive tackles. You got Sham, which is big, but Tennessee was trying to get 3 of the 4 at one time and only got one offensive tackle that they valued early on. I mean, they like Larry Johnson, they like Aiden Bussell, they like Bison Lang. I mean, those are the other offensive lines in this class. But those tackles like the Stanton Ramels, the Francis, some of those other guys,
Sure.
Swung and missed over the summer.
Yeah, and that's part of it too. I think Sham, like you said, was really big to get in July, and he's another one that showed a lot of improvement as a senior, and just another massive human being. I mean, these tackles, in theory, one day you could have Sham and Larry on each side of the line. Yeah, good luck getting around those guys. Probably won't happen, but it could happen. So I think that's a really nice foundational get. I think he's the one that has an opportunity to make plays the soonest from that group, at least among the high school trio that are coming in. And what I like about the other ones is you kind of know what you're getting, right? We mentioned Johnson could be the swing prospect, Sham, clear tackle talent. Bussell could potentially be a right tackle. Lang is 100% an interior guy, right? So I like that where hey, foundationally, this is where player X is going to line up. And while the ceiling might not be the highest for Bussell and Lang in particular, the floor is strong. Lang is a phone booth mauler. He's a guy that has another great frame relative to the position. Maybe he can learn some center, and that would probably maximize his visibility at the next level. But even if he doesn't, this is a front side guard that you're going to be able to run behind. So yeah, not as strong as other position groups, certainly. I think wide receiver, obviously quarterback, corner, some of the best groups on the roster, but you still got volume and variance with this offensive line haul. And that's still important in the SEC. You got to do it every single cycle. And we know when you do have some misses, our good friend, the transfer portal, is still available to help you close some of those gaps. So I do think it'll be quite fine for Tennessee. And usually it makes you double down the next cycle. So I would imagine the 2024 recruiting cycle will have a whole lot of offensive tackles throughout it.
No doubt. It's John Garcia. He's our recruiting insider for the Locked On Podcast Network. John, what's coming up? What do you have coming up over the last couple of days before National Signing Day?
Well, yeah, it's all about that, right? Countdown to signing day, top storylines. There are some big decisions still this week ahead of signing day, and then trying to figure out when the dust settles, not only who the top classes are, but who's left, who is going to wait beyond December 21st. We've already got some big commitments that are expected the 22nd, and we're starting to see a few more recruits talk about February. So who slips through the cracks, how that affects these teams and it affects these recruits. We'll dig into all that at Sports Illustrated.
John, I appreciate it as always, man. Thanks so much and have a great weekend.
Likewise, Eric. Thanks for having me.
That's John Garcia, Locked On Insider, and of course he is from Sports Illustrated. That's going to do it here for today's edition of Locked On Vols. Can't thank you guys enough for making Locked On Vols your first listen every single day. 6K by Christmas Day on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up, that like button, and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back here on Locked On Vols on Tuesday. Big weekend coming up. Going to take Monday off. So we'll be back on Tuesday. Get you set for National Signing Day as well. Appreciate it, guys. Check out Locked On Sports today. Make that your second listen right behind Locked On Vols. That's your first listen each and every day. Stay safe. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. This is Locked On Vols.